Hello and welcome. I feel like an old disc jockey holding my microphone because it was on the other side of the desk, so I started and realised I quickly had to grab it. So anyway, welcome to my latest video on my top 1000. Got a sudden urge to cough then, talking too much. This latest video on my top 1000, we're going numbers 890 down to 881. So 10 more fighters being added in. So let's go to the first of those now. And it is actually Tommy the Duke Morrison, star of Rocky V and former heavyweight title holder. Tommy Morrison beat two world champions. He fought 25 rounds against champions. And Morrison beat one Hall of Fame fighter. And in total fought 18 rounds against Hall of Famers. Now against rated fighters, Tommy Morrison had 8 fights in total. He scored a total of 42 knockouts. 33 of them in 3 rounds or less. And 18 in the first round. So even though he scored similar knockout numbers to Deontay Wilder, people don't call him the hardest puncher in boxing history. But anyway, on to being rated. He was top 10 rated as a fighter for 2 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 28 fights. Now, Tommy Morrison was never pound for pound rated. He did have 2 fights against pound for pounders and scored 1 win against pound for pounders, but scored no wins against pound for pound top 3 or number 1 rated fighters. And Morrison's opposition fought rate is 2 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 2 from 13. So from his 5 fights against champions, Morrison has 2 wins with 3 losses, no draws and 1 KO. He has 2 fights against Hall of Famers, including 1 win, 1 loss, no draws and no KOs, and he has 4 title fights, split record between 2 wins and 2 losses with no draws and 1 title defence. So Tommy Morrison is first in 890. When we go on to our next fighter in 889, it's a newcomer, because new fighters are being added to my top 1000 every year. And from last year to this year, there's a whole number of them. I've shown a few already, there's more to come. This fighter is called Dave Rosenberg. Dave Rosenberg beat no world champions. He fought 20 rounds against champions. And Rosenberg beat no Hall of Fame fighters. He did fight 32 rounds against Hall of Famers in his career. And he had 2 fights against rated fighters. Rosenberg came around at the time when it was transitioning from the pre-rating era to the rating era. So he kind of missed out to an extent. He scored 12 KOs. 4 of those KOs in 3 rounds or less. And Dave Rosenberg scored 0 first round wins. Now, he was not top 10 rated for any years in his career, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 14 fights. Now, Dave Rosenberg was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings. He did have 3 fights against pound for pounders, but scores no wins in the 3 pound for pound categories, and his opposition fought rate comes in at 3 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 2 from 13. So Rosenberg had 2 fights against champions. He lost them both. He had 3 fights against Hall of Famers and again lost all 3. He did have 2 world title fights, including 1 win, 1 loss, no draw, and 0 title defences. So there's Dave Rosenberg in 889. When we go to fight at 888, it is the tough Marty Servo, who had that deviated septum in his nose, suffered headaches, blah, 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 blah. Very tough fighter though, not a big puncher, but a very tough fighter. So Marty Servo beat 2 world champions. He fought a total of 36 rounds against champions, and Servo beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter individually and fought a total of 32 rounds against Hall of Famers. Now against rated fighters, Servo comes in with a total of 8. He scored 14 knockouts in his career, 7 of them in 3 rounds or less, and Servo also scored 2 first round wins. Now, he was never top 10 rated, and his longest unbeaten run was an unbeaten run of 44 fights in total. Now, he was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings. Servo did have 4 fights against pound for pound fighters, and he scored 2 wins against pound for pound fighters overall, but 0 wins against pound for pound top 3 and pound for pound number 1 rated fighters. And Marty Servo's opposition fought rate comes in at 2 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. I do guarantee they do start going up, but we're still in the lower echelons of my top 1000 at the moment, but trust me, they do start to go up. So fights against champions, Servo has 5, of which he's scored 2 wins with 3 losses, no draws and no KOs. He has 4 fights against Hall of Famers, including 1 win, 3 loss, no draw and no KOs, and he has 1 world title fight that is a win, with of course 0 title defences. Now, someone once said to me, well, you don't need to say he had no title defences, because obviously if he's only got one title fight when he can't make a defence, because you have to have 2 fights. And I said, no, you can be awarded a belt and then have one title fight and it be a title defence. Totally went past him. He was like, oh, yeah, you're right. I'm like, well, yeah, of course I'm right on that. If you're awarded a belt, your first fight is defending it, a bit like Daniel Dubois with Joshua. So anyway, there's Marty Servo. When we go to fight number 887, it is Raul Macias. Now, Raul Macias beat no world champions. He fought 15 rounds against champions, and he beat no Hall of Fame fighters. He also fought no rounds against Hall of Famers. Raul Macias had 14 fights against rated opponents in his career. He scored a total of 25 knockouts, 6 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 1 in the first round. And Raul Macias was top 10 rated for a total of 5 years. The longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 19 fights, and he was pound for pound rated for 0 years. Now, Raul Macias had 1 fight against pound for pound fighters, but scored no wins in the 3 pound for pound categories. Again, a lot of fighters down at this level are not scoring many wins in that category, but when you go to a Jack Britton, other fighters coming up, you will see some score quite highly in those categories. But again, like a bit with many other things, we're still at the lower ratings at the moment. So the opposition fought rate is 1 from 18, and the opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. So Macias had 1 fight against a champion. That was a defeat. He had no fights against Hall of Famers, and he had 4 world title fights, including 3 wins, 1 loss, no draws, whilst making 2 title defences. So that's Raul Macias in 887. When we go to number 886, it is former world champion John David Jackson. Now, John David Jackson beat 5 world champions in his career. He fought a total of 75 rounds against champions, and he beat no Hall of Famers individually, but fought 7 rounds against Hall of Famers overall in his career. And John David Jackson had 9 fights against rated opponents. In terms of knockouts, he scored 20 knockouts overall, 10 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 4 in the first round. Now, John David Jackson was top 10 rated as a fighter for 8 years. The longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 32 fights, and he did get pound for pound rated for 1 year in my all-time rankings. Now, John David Jackson had 1 fight against pound for pound fighters, but scored no wins in 3 pound for pound categories, and his opposition fought rate is 1 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. So, from 8 fights against champions in total, John David Jackson scored 5 wins with 3 losses, no draws, and 2 KOs. He has 1 fight against a Hall of Famer that is a defeat, and he has a respectable title record of 9 title fights overall, including 7 wins, 2 loss, no draw, and 5 title defences. So there is John David Jackson. In number 885 now is a fighter called Klondike Haynes. Now, Klondike Haynes beat 1 world champion. He fought 80 rounds against world champions, and he beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter individually. Klondike also fought 47 rounds against Hall of Famers. Now, in terms of fights against rated fighters, as a solid pre-rating era fighter, he has 0. He scored 14 knockouts in his career, Klondike, 6 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 0 in the first round. Now, as a pre-rating era fighter, he was never top 10 rated, and the longest unbeaten run in Klondike Haynes' career was an unbeaten run of 10 fights. Now, he was never pound for pound rated. I've made a little error there, never mind. He had 9 fights against pound for pound fighters overall, and he scored 2 wins against pound for pounders, and he scored 1 win against a pound for pound top 3 fighter, and 1 win against pound for pound number 1 rated fighter. His opposition fought rate is 2 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. So, fights against champions, Klondike had 11 fights against champions, including 1 win, 9 loss, 1 draw with 1 KO. He has 5 fights against Hall of Famers, including 1 win, 3 loss, 1 draw with 1 KO, and he has 2 world title fights that are both defeats. So, despite people calling him a world champion, Klondike made a claim on a title, but it was not the official coloured title. So therefore he never was a world champion in my eyes, despite some people insisting that he was. In all reality, he wasn't. So, not under the titles I recognise. I mean, you can recognise a Mickey Mouse title for me and call someone a champion, but, I go on certain titles, and if a fighter's not covered by those titles, they're not called a world champion by myself. So there's Klondike in 885. When we go to fighter number 884, okay, it's a lesser-known fighter called Dal Hawkins. Dal Hawkins had a decent little career, okay. He beat 2 world champions. He fought 80 rounds against champions, and Dal Hawkins beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter, and he fought a total of 47 rounds against Hall of Famers. Now, Dal Hawkins had 0 fights against rated fighters, okay. He scored 19 knockouts in his career, and Dal Hawkins scored 8 KOs inside 3 rounds or less. He also scored 1 first round win. Now, Dal Hawkins, as a pre-rating era fighter, was never top 10 rated. The longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 7 fights, and he was never pound for pound rated. Dal Hawkins did have 8 fights against pound for pound rated fighters, scoring 1 win against pound for pounders overall. He also scored 1 win apiece against pound for pound top 3 and pound for pound number 1 rated fighters. And Dal Hawkins' opposition fought rate is 2 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. So, from his 8 fights against champions, Dal Hawkins scored 3 wins with 4 losses, 1 draw and 1 KO. He has 5 fights against Hall of Famers, including 1 win, 3 loss, 1 draw with 0 KOs, and Dal Hawkins never had a world title fight. So there's Dal Hawkins. Okay, on to our next fighter now, Hiroki Ioka. Hiroki Ioka, another of the excellent fighters in Japan's long, deep history in boxing, that actually, prior to some people's beliefs, does stretch back before the year 2000. Some people have this strange belief now that all the fantastic Japanese fighters we have with us now, it only really started around the year 2000. Complete fallacy. You can trace them back through the 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s. It is what it is. They have a much longer, richer history in boxing than many modern fans give them credit for. So Hiroki Ioka beat 3 world champions. He fought 125 rounds against champions, a lot down at this level. He beat no Hall of Fame fighters and also fought no rounds against Hall of Famers. Now, Ioka had 7 fights against rated opponents, and he scored a total of 17 knockouts, 8 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 1 in the first round. Ioka was top 10 rated for a total of 2 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 11 fights. Now, he was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings. He also had 0 fights against pound for pound fighters, so Hiroki Ioka scored no wins in the 3 pound for pound categories, and his opposition fought rate is 2 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 1 from 13. Now, we did have 12 fights against champions, okay, scoring 3 wins with 8 losses, 1 draw and 1 KO. He has 0 fights against Hall of Famers, and in world title fights, he has a large world title fight record of 13 world title fights, Hiroki Ioka, scoring 5 wins with 7 losses, 1 draw, whilst also making 4 title defences. So there's 8 down, people, 2 to go. Okay, so we'll go to fighter number 882 now, a fighter called Solly Seaman. Now, Solly Seaman beat 1 world champion, okay, he fought 42 rounds against champions. He beat no Hall of Fame fighters. He did fight 20 rounds against Hall of Famers. And against rated fighters, okay, Solly Seaman had a total of 12. Now, Solly Seaman scored 10 knockouts in his career, 4 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 1 in the first round. Solly Seaman was top 10 rated for a total of 2 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 15 fights. Now, he was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings. Solly Seaman did have 2 fights against pound for pounders, but scored no wins in 3 pound for pound categories, and his opposition fought rate, okay, is 3 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 2 from 13. So from 4 fights against champions in total, Solly Seaman scored 1 win with 3 losses, no draws and 0 KOs. He has 2 fights against Hall of Famers. Both of those fights for Seaman were defeats, and he has 0 world title fights. And going on to our final fighter, okay, fantastic little fighter from the modern time, Katsunari Takayama, the multiple-time world champion. Now, he beat 2 world champions, okay? He fought a total of 105 rounds against champions, did Takayama. He beat no Hall of Fame fighters, and he fought no rounds against Hall of Famers. Takayama had 11 fights against rated fighters. He scored 12 knockouts in his career, 4 in 3 rounds or less, and 0 in the first round. But Katsunari Takayama was top 10 rated for longer than a decade throughout his career, a total of 11 years, and his longest unbeaten run was one of 10 fights. Now, he was never pound-for-pound rated in my all-time rankings. He did have 1 fight against a pound-for-pounder, scoring 0 wins in the 3 pound-for-pound categories, and the opposition fought rate was 2 from 18, and the opposition beat rate was 1 from 13. So Katsunari Takayama, okay, had a total of 9 fights against champions, including 3 wins, 6 losses, no draws, and no KOs. He has no fights against Hall of Famers, and he has a large world title fight record, a bit like Hiroki Ioka. A lot of Japanese fighters have a lot of world title fights. He had a total of 15. That included 8 wins with 7 losses, no draws, and 4 title defences. So Katsunari Takayama finishes my latest 10 fighters on my 2025 Top 1000 countdown. More videos coming up over coming days. I'm the Boxing Librarian, and I am out for now.